Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to cover Tesla's charging network in today's video. There's been a lot of momentum and a lot of talk about its future potential. And in this video, I want to cover the latest around that format. And I want to quantify what this could mean for Tesla in the long term. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, on the heels of Ford and GM coming out and saying they're going to adopt Tesla's standard, we also have news from different charging companies that are doing the same. Here's a few tweets from Sawyer Merritt, which I highly recommend you follow him on Twitter. News: ChargePoint, which is a charging provider, will soon offer NACS, the North American Charging Standard, which is Tesla's plug, connector options for its charging solutions. Also, not a few minutes before or after that announcement, there's been 4 different announcements that have happened around similar news. Tritium, a global developer and manufacturer of direct current fast chargers for EVs, today announced the company will provide Tesla's North American charging standard as a connector option with its fast chargers. And another one, ChemPower will include Tesla's North American charging standard as an option for the company's charging offering. ChemPower is preparing to add NACS as an option for all North American deliveries. Again, this broke on Monday, June 12th. And another one, EV charging equipment maker Blink Charging said on Monday it will launch a new fast charger with Tesla's connector as the industry moves away from the standard CCS connector. So we've had the string of charging companies coming out and adopting NACS, Tesla's plug, soon after GM and Ford both came out and said they're going to take on Tesla's standard, which obviously bodes extremely well for that plug and Tesla's really ability to sell its charging network to EV customers in the future and today as well. 16 charging companies and 3 automakers have now signed up to use Tesla's NACS, and the majority of those have been announced in the last week or two. So a lot of recent momentum has been building around this charging standard, which obviously, again, bodes extremely well for a company like Tesla. Now, one of the things I want to keep in mind for this video is that as the adoption of Tesla's standard is accelerating, this will also mean that additional automakers like Volkswagen and others are probably going to come out and announce the adoption pretty shortly here, as well as charging networks like Electrify America, which is the second largest behind Tesla's Supercharger network. And this, of course, is going to continue the momentum and accelerate Tesla's momentum into the coming year and decade. In case you're not familiar with the formats, this is what Tesla's plug looks like, and you can see that it's significantly smaller than the CHAdeMO or CHAdeMO, depending how you want to pronounce it, and the CCS adapters, a lot more durable, a lot more convenient to use. Anybody who's been using electric vehicle charge plugs will tell you that this standard has been far superior, really ever since Tesla cars came out. And this is the map of Tesla's supercharging network, in case you're not familiar with it. These are just dots on a map, but really the thing here that I want to get across is that there's a lot of them out there already in the United States, and I believe Tesla has plans to double this network in the coming year or two. In contrast with an Electrify America, which is the second largest, they have a lot of different charge points across the US, but you can see that there's a pretty significant difference as far as how many there are, especially in the middle of the country. And then I also want to play a clip from Ford CEO Jim Farley as to why a company like Ford decided to go with Tesla's plug in the first place, which really helps explain why Tesla is going to have such a dominant position in the coming decade or so, which we'll use to quantify how much money Tesla can make from this change, or really this adoption by the broader EV industry. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what Jim Farley has to say.
Why Tesla? Why this standard? And do you think by you and Tesla teaming up together, you kind of win over and can change what's going to be the standard?
It's a great question. So we believe that customers should have, as you said, the option of using either standard, and with adapters and software, we could do that both. But we really like the Tesla standard from a customer standpoint. When you look at how easy it is to plug in, if you drop the cord, the Tesla system is more robust. The other standard is great, and we'll have adapters for that. But we also really love the locations. Like, I remember I was going on vacation with my kids. My kids kept saying, "Hey, Dad, can we stop there? That's one of those Tesla supercharging." I was like, "No, kids, we're going to go over here behind this building." And so it's a bet for our customers, and we want our customers be able to use both systems actually with adapters.
Now, I think if we listen to Jim Farley talk about Tesla's Supercharger network, you can see that Tesla has a big advantage from the standpoint of the customer experience and its locations. The locations of those chargers are much more plentiful, and there are much better areas for people to charge their cars, especially when they're going on long road trips. A good way to think about Tesla's Supercharger network is that it's a next generation fuel pump. And I want to play a clip from Monroe Live. This is Sandy and Corey talking about Tesla's Supercharger network and how to properly think about it. Corey has some very interesting commentary here, which I think is very relevant to how we should think about Tesla's Supercharger network and how to quantify it in the future. Let's go ahead and take a listen there.
Corey's suggestion, or Corey's phrase is?
Tesla owns the gas stations.
There you go.
So think about it. Imagine if you were driving an internal combustion engine vehicle and everywhere you went to fill up, you were filling up at a General Motors filling station. That's the equivalent. Think about the revenue that will be generated from all the future charging sessions. And where does that revenue and that profit go? Tesla Motor Company. Absolutely mind-blowing. All the other charging infrastructures, all the other charging companies are now at a huge disadvantage. And other OEMs, if you want to play in the United States, you better think about announcing very quickly that you're switching to NACS. What's your thoughts on that, Sandy?
Absolutely correct. So here's the one that I want to see happen as soon as possible. Rivian. Please consider dumping whatever the SAE thing and going to the North American charger from Tesla. Please do it. I mean, you will make my wife so happy. It won't. I mean, it'll be phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal if Rivian can go and do that. The other guys, I think that they're going to have to think about it. I'm sure that probably for sure at Volkswagen, they're slitting their wrists.
I love you, Sandy. So if we take Sandy's comments and Corey's comments around Tesla's charging standard, these are industry experts, engineering experts at Monroe and Associates. I highly recommend their channel. They basically tear down every single EV that's been out there and compare them across all different variables. And they've basically have said for a long time that Tesla not only has the best technology, but they seem to have the best moats around certain things, meaning the best way to really maximize the potential of a certain technology or something that they're working on. And now it appears that the Supercharger network or Tesla's charging network is becoming a big competitive advantage. And so let's go ahead and do some math. Let's take Jim's comments. Let's take Sandy and Corey's comments, and let's look at the recent trends that have been happening around the charging network and extrapolate those out into the future to see how this could impact Tesla's financials. Before we do that, I would love it if you throw me a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show this to more people. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And so let's go ahead and make a couple assumptions for our math exercise so that we can have a sort of a baseline, all of us together, so that we can end up with similar numbers at the end. Then at the end, I would love to hear your thoughts on how you're approaching this math equation or how you're thinking about this long-term for Tesla. So the first thing I'm thinking about here is that the NACS, so Tesla's Plug, North American Charging Standard, will become the standard in North America. So Canada, United States, and Mexico, all automakers and all charging locations will adopt the NACS. Then I'm assuming out to 2040. So I want to calculate out, let's say by 2040, how much Tesla could be making each year from the charging stations. By then, I'm going to assume that 80% of cars on the road by 2040, which is a little less than 20 years away, will be EVs. So this gives time to new automakers to come in and create EVs and essentially try to replace as much of the existing fleet as possible in the United States. So that's one of my assumptions. Then the other assumption I'm making is that 50% of EVs on the road in 2040 will use Tesla chargers 10 times a year for long distance travel. Now, this probably seems low, 10 times a year at a charging station. Of course, if you're not familiar with EVs, you're like, you only have to go to the fuel pump 10 times. Well, not really. You're just doing most of your charging at home because most people don't really travel more than, say, 100 to 150 miles a day. But Americans love their road trips. Canadians and Mexicans love their road trips as well. So it's one of those things where I'm trying to be conservative in how many times a customer or a driver will actually use a charging stop outside of their home. And so for this exercise, I'm going to assume 50% of EVs, so half the EVs on the road, will use a Tesla Supercharger 10 times a year. Now, the number of cars in the US fleet as of 2021 per Google is roughly 290 million vehicles total, includes every sort of type of car, truck, semi, everything like that. There's about 290 million of them on the road today, probably slightly more in 2023, but let's just use 290 million as our number. And then assume the fleet remains relatively consistent all the way out to 2040. So you don't really have an increase in cars or a decrease. It stays about the same. You have about 290 million cars per year, which is probably wrong because we're going to have more cars because there's going to be more people here, but that's okay. We'll use 290 just again to be conservative on the number. And so if we take 80% of all EVs being EVs and 50 of them charging at a Tesla station of 290 million cars, that comes out to be 116 million cars per year charging 10 times at a Tesla Supercharger. So 50% of 80% of 290 million cars, that is 116 million cars charging 10 times per year at Tesla Superchargers, and that is equal to 1.16 billion chargers per year at Tesla Superchargers. So it's 116 million cars charging 10 times at Tesla Superchargers per year, which is 1.16 billion chargers per year. Now, for 2040, I'm going to assume an average battery size roughly of 50 kilowatt hours. Right now, if we take a Model Y, it's about 75 kilowatt hours. A Model S and an X from Tesla is about 100 kilowatt hours. But as we kind of go down the cost curve and EVs become more and more affordable, then my assumption is that the batteries will also get smaller so that people can afford them. And so my average kilowatt hour size by 2040 for all EVs, I'm going to assume is 50 kilowatt hours, which is probably pretty close to correct. And I'm going to assume that when somebody arrives at a charging station, their average charge is going to be from 20% to 80%. So this won't be a full charge from 0 to 100. Most EV drivers arrive at a charging station with some battery and they leave with about 80 to 90%. So to be conservative, I'm going to say 20 to 80% charge, which is a 60% charge, right? From 20% to 60% from 20% to 80%. From 20% to 80%, it's a 60% charge. It's one way to think about it. And with a 50 kilowatt hour battery, 60% of 50 kilowatt hours is 30 kilowatt hours per charging session. So each time you stop at a charger, you're charging for 30 kilowatt hours, which is the unit of measure used to measure how much energy there is in a battery, which is the same as your electricity bill. When you look at your cost per kilowatt hour, it's basically the same thing. It's just now this is using the size of the battery at 30 kilowatt hours. Now I'm going to assume 25 cents per kilowatt hours of superchargers, which is probably low, but I'm going to use this based on my average when I'm driving around and doing road trips with my Tesla, probably on the low side, but again, I want to be conservative. So 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And so if you times that by the 30 kilowatt hour charge, that's 60% charge, it's about $7.50 per charge. And if you're doing this 10 times a year, right, times 1.16 billion chargers per year, which is 116 million cars charging 10 times a year, this equals to $8.7 billion in revenue per year in North America only. $8.7 billion in revenue per year in North America only, using pretty conservative assumptions and in only one region of the world, assuming that 40% of all cars on the road use Tesla Superchargers only 10 times per year. $8.7 billion in revenue per year. I'd love to hear what you think about that number. Now, I want to highlight a tweet from Elon Musk. So this was in response to Ross Gerber about a year ago. Hey, Elon Musk, trying to model out the supercharger network value. It seems you work at 50% gross margin on the Tesla energy cost. Is this across the network or does it vary by location? And Elon Musk replied and said, we aim for 30% gross margin or 10% profitability, all costs included. So if we extrapolate out that $8.7 billion number at a 30% gross margin, that's $2.6 billion in gross margin in North America alone per year, or 10% net profit at $870 million per year from those cars using the network. Now, what I really want to think through is what are some of the variables that will change the equation or could have a significant impact on Tesla's ability to generate revenue from the Supercharger model. Now, as Tesla grows its energy division with batteries and solar, costs to generate electricity should plummet, meaning that as Tesla continues to grow its charging network and they start introducing more of their batteries and their solar panels, what will end up happening over time is that these charging stations will just generate their own electricity at near zero cost. Because you have your solar panels, you store them with the battery, people show up, you're just charging them using the sun. Seems pretty cheap, right? The initial cost would be the installation of the batteries and the solar panels, but over time, that should just generate electricity on its own, which will vastly reduce Tesla's cost. The other variable is that Tesla has already bear the cost burden with its own cars. Non-Tesla EVs are gravy. So the current Tesla charging infrastructure that exists right now was funded by the current Tesla cars, and they'll continue to be funded by Tesla cars as they get sold into the future. So every non-Tesla EV that's charging from those locations, theoretically, Tesla has already paid for the cost. So any dollar they charge from charging should be 100% profit, because they already have paid for it, essentially, one way to think about it. Now, the one thing they'll have to pay for is obviously the generation of electricity, but if they have battery and solar already making the electricity for them, theoretically, the cost to actually charge those cars to Tesla should be near zero, which means Tesla will be able to keep most of that 25 cent. Who knows? They might be able to keep 23 cents, 24 cents, 20 cents, but significantly more than a 30% margin number. And this mechanism should allow Tesla to keep a larger percentage of revenue as pure profit over time. Again, it could be 30% margin today, but it could go to 50%, 80%, especially as more and more non-Tesla EVs join the charging network. And Tesla essentially makes money from every single EV sold in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and maybe globally, long term, if this is adopted by other countries and continents. Now, another variable could be that people will use the Supercharger network more than 10 times a year. If it becomes cheaper and cheaper to get around, an EV is a lot cheaper to operate than a gas car, maybe people will be willing to take more road trips. And so maybe it goes from 10 times a year to 15 times a year to 20 times a year, which could make that number double or triple. Who knows how many times people will use the charging network. But the more people travel, the more money Tesla should make from the charging network. And then another variable as well is that the global fleet right now, globally in the world, is over 1 billion cars. What if the rest of the world adopts Tesla's plug and the NACS standard becomes basically the standard globally, and because of Tesla's superiority when it comes to location of the chargers, where they have put them, their reliability, so on and so forth, the adoption rate of Tesla's chargers becomes similar across the world. So it's not 40% of all cars in the US, Canada, Mexico, it's 40% of all cars. And so all of a sudden you have a quadrupling effect or a 10x effect on how many cars are charging on the network. So it could go from 8.7 billion to 87 billion. I don't know, right? So it could really make that number a lot bigger. And of course, we also have to think about the continued development of areas in Asia, Africa, and South America that could significantly increase the fleet. So countries that today traditionally don't purchase new cars, or they don't have the infrastructure for electric vehicles, in the next 20 years with the advancements of technology, the internet, infrastructure, AI, robotics, automation, a lot of these countries could come online and you could have an additional, 1 to 3 billion people that can't afford an electric vehicle today could afford an electric vehicle in 20 years. So how will that impact Tesla's profitability? Yet another variable to think through. But I really want to hear what you think. Leave me a comment in the comment section below, how you're thinking about this equation, how big you think the number is going to get, how big of a positive do you think this is for Tesla and the broader EV world. And if you'd like to support the channel, I have some new designs in my merch store. We have the robots are coming for your chores, and the giant robots are coming along with the standard the robots are coming shirt. So if you want to support the channel, I have a link for that in my description below. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, everybody, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Share this with your friends if you'd like to get their opinion as as well, or if you'd like them to watch this video so they can have a better understanding of the potential of charging for Tesla in the future. And I really hope this video was informative and helpful. We'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.